Budget Committee meeting. Welcome to those in the audience, and thank you, committee members. So this is the final presentation before we go to the full townwide referendum, or the district meeting.
Right.
So we should be pretty polished at this point. I'll turn it over to Reagan, and we'll run down through the presentation. I believe we'll also be referencing the handout that we sent out in link 22.
So I'd actually like to start there because the insert we'll refer to is in the middle section of the link 22, and so if you pull that out, we'll just begin there to get context about this year. So all citizens should have received this link 22 in their mailbox, and we hope that if they haven't had occasion already to review it, they can do so before we go to the district budget meeting. The specifics of our budget, how each of the categories came together, what the priorities were for our budget overall, are outlined in the letter to the citizens, and we'll talk about the aspects of those tonight. But at the bottom of the page, you'll see each of our towns in the RSU listed and what the required local commitment was from the state for each of the 4 communities, and then what the other local assessment that the RSU 22 is asking for has come to be for each of the 4 towns. And we do have a cost-sharing formula in RSU 22 that's based on 80% valuation of your town and 20% enrollment numbers coming from your town. So we have projected what the assessment increase per $100,000 of valuation would be for the average taxpayer. And we would like to emphasize that we are giving these projections because we have had this request in the past. It's not a perfect science until each of the town's budgets come together on their end, but we're hopeful that it gives people a guide. Okay. So we'll come back to this page in just a bit, and tonight is a night for people to get their questions answered, so we want to be sure that this is just as much hearing from those in the audience or at the table here tonight as it is us presenting to you. So don't be shy and let us know when you have a question. Is there anything you'd like to comment on before we get started? Okay, so Thursday night will be the district budget meeting. That evening we'll move through each of the 11 articles that are cost center categories, and they're listed inside of the link 22 paper. We also have additional articles that we'll review that summarize the budget, speak to specialties such as capital reserve and a new reserve fund that we're proposing for technology, along with adult education. So we look forward to people getting their questions answered so we can have an effective budget meeting and get a budget ratified to be voted on Tuesday the 11th. Okay, so we'll go to the screen for a moment and look at some of the presentation points. So our budget process began quite some time ago with 9 meetings, and then we also had a meeting that was on May 15th, which allowed our school committee to ratify a number to come recommended to you, and that's what you're seeing in the link 22. The budget committee is now hosting a public forum tonight, and we look forward to a district budget meeting that's well attended on Thursday. So please get the word out. A list of our meetings that we've had, and once again this year we had meetings per category so that we could discuss in depth each of the cost centers for our budget. And I think the way that we got better this year in doing this is that we would come back after each meeting and review where we had been and make any adjustments that we needed to. And I hope that people felt those were outlined well so we're clear going forward. As I said, we have a cost-sharing formula, and in the school district funding formula across the state of Maine, enrollment plays a considerable part in how it's decided what our recipe ingredients are to make our school fund. So for RSU 22, we do see that we have very stable enrollment. We do have an increase of 15.5 students by our ED 279, which is the state form for bestowing school funding. But our total enrollment is 2,411 students, and this is because we include tuition students that come to us from other towns. We have homeschool students who attend here for parts of the day, and so we do get to count the enrollment in which they are coming, and that's where we get our half, because some of those children only attend 1 class a day, maybe 3 classes a day. And then we have superintendent agreements where both superintendents from the receiving district and the sending district agree that the tuition can come to us as the unit. So we do have a higher enrollment than our ED 279 shows. You can see the breakdown there by town, and Hampden, of course, has the highest enrollment in our RSU, and they have also seen an increase of 13 students. Winterport has 598 attending students, and we have seen a decrease in Winterport by 3 students. Newburgh, 264.5 students, and that's a slight increase. And then Frankfort, 181.5 students, and a very minimal increase there for Frankfort's enrollment. But 64 children attending our schools through other means. And that's one thing we'd like to point out. We do want to continue to make tuition students attracted to RSU 22. We also want to engage homeschoolers because we do have a lot to offer, and we also feel they have a lot to offer to us, so bringing them in when we can is a good community partnership. And the superintendent agreements are certainly something that is case-by-case basis. RSU 22 has had strong enrollment over the past 10 years. There are many school districts in Maine that are facing significant declines in enrollment. RSU 22 is not one of them, and we are seeing that there will be projections of growth. And I think even if you drive through our 4 towns, we see that there are buildings and subdivisions being planned. So it's great to see that we're still the school district that a lot of families want to choose. We had a census done back in 2017, I believe, to project our enrollment out for 10 years. So this is the planning decisions document around that, showing what the projected enrollment would be. We are going to be requesting another one of these studies in the next couple of years, because we certainly see that there are projected projects in town that would lead us to believe enrollment would be steady, if not grow. And then this is just simply a graphic of the distribution of our 4 towns in the RSU for enrollment. So what does this tell us about the budget and the requests that are being made right now? I think that we were confident going into this budget year that we have strong enrollment and need to be responsive to the number of children that we're currently carrying, because we don't see in the future that we're going to have drops. So we wanted to keep the support where we were, make sure we were able to think about the supports that need to grow. And while it's certainly not encompassing everything that a district would wish to do, it is trying to make a good faith effort toward the aspects that we know have to be started now at least. So any questions or points about enrollment? Okay, we'll move on to revenue change. So revenue change drivers include several things. The most substantial is our state allocation from the state funding formula. So this year, going into FY20, we are expected to receive $19,690,000 and some change. This is an increase over the FY19 state subsidy of about $766,000. State agency client funds are funds that we pull down by billing for services that we actually use to serve students who are wards of the state. And so these aren't necessarily students who are just foster students. They're also children who are living in housing that is provided by different providers such as Sweetser. And so we cannot always predict how many students will be enrolled in RSU 22, nor the services that they will need. But what has become a bit more constricting is how we're able to bill for these services. So it is challenging for us to pull down as much funding as we have in the past, and that is true across the state, because the state is changing the way in which we're able to bill for services that way. Local earned revenue, we are seeing a modest change in that, and we recognize that there are some ways that we wish to continue to promote local earned revenue. We'll be talking about some of those as we move through our budget document. And then our unallocated fund balance, we are in a position where we feel like we're not only strong and that our fund balance is present to support our district, but we also recognize we'd like it to offset the taxation of our local taxpayers. And we're increasing the amount this year that we're putting toward the budget to $500,000, which is an increase of $60,000 over last year. So as you can see, we are anticipating to have an additional $715,716.72 in revenue toward our budget. And how this came to be is that we recognize that there was a valuation increase across our 4 towns, but the mill rate decreased, and therefore the required local for each of the towns was not as significant. But we are asking this year that we have an additional local support of $520,057 to make up the gap. This is just a graphic of budget subsidy amounts that we've received over the years, and you can see that since about 2013, we've had pretty consistent revenue. Anyone with a point or a question or wondering? Yes.
Can I didn't know if I could ask at this
At
point.
any time.
When is the final numbers going to come in for the state budget? I mean, that's always a given and nobody ever knows, but what's it projecting at this point?
Fair question. We don't have a date.
You don't?
When we think, no.
Okay.
And we are feeling confident that the numbers that we're seeing are likely to be accurate. That's our hope. Rick, would you have anything to add?
The only comment I'd have, Faye, is the report today that the Democrats and Republicans are getting close to endorse the budget. So we're pretty confident the number we have is going to be accurate versus some years, as you well know, we were concerned that it might decrease. We don't anticipate that. We don't anticipate that happening this year. We're pretty confident.
And at present, what is your unallocated fund balance? I know you're increasing how much you're putting towards this budget. What are you keeping in line?
Okay, well, our last audited fund balance came in for June 30th, 2018. Right? So that was 1.9.
Okay.
And we, of course, dedicated out of that to this year's budget $440. We also put away $275,000 toward capital reserve. Okay, so we are anticipating to be right around the same place going into next year.
And you're comfortable with that balance once you allocate those funds out?
Yes, because we project on our payroll and what we would need if we were in any type of a situation with subsidy not coming in. We feel that that works for us.
I know in the past you've had concerns at your budget meetings if you've received more from the state than what you've projected. What are you planning to do with that money? Are you planning on just putting it into a fund balance?
We are planning to put it into a fund balance.
And is the goal to rotate that into the tax base for the following year?
That's right. Well,
You'd have to, Faye, because you can't exceed what the voters authorize on a Thursday night and Tuesday as well.
Right. But I mean, is your final goal though to ensure that that amount of money,
Yes,
whatever it
Yes.
is, will be put towards
yes,
next year?
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And that happened, if you recall, a couple of years ago, because we
Right.
went to the district budget meeting not knowing your earlier question, and then 250,000 thereabouts, whatever came after the fact, and we rolled it into the next year's
It was a
budget.
big surprise.
That's exactly right, yeah. A pleasant surprise.
Yes.
And
Thank
on
you.
page 19 of your handout, it shows the fund balance history.
Oh, it does,
If you'd like to
okay,
take a
thank
peek
you.
there. So our budget summary comparison to last year, you'll see that we have a budget proposal of $33,231,835.78, which is a 4.06% increase over FY19. And then we have a breakdown here that we can take a peek at and talk more about that local earned revenue that you saw on the revenue change sheet. You'll see the state allocation coming in as we discussed, and then our reduction of the state agency client, that's what SAC is for, and then the local earned revenue. We do collect rental fees primarily around the use of our turf, and we actually have a schedule that we follow for how we charge for that space. And we've been asked many times if we've thought about increasing the amount of rental fee that we're asking for. But we are holding steady now because we have to be competitive with other area of the facilities. And there are some university facilities that are actually not charging, or they are doing flat fees that work for a lot of different organizations. So we want to be a community partner. We want to attract people, players to RSU 22. And so we continue to work primarily with the MPA and some local athletic youth organizations.
Regan, I'd like to accentuate a line that sometimes goes unnoticed on page 17. Under local earned revenue, notice the third line down, athletic user fee. That's for our students who play athletic interscholastic events. They pay $50, right? Yeah, $50 per sport per season. So you can see that we're indicating revenue there of $30,000 and $26,000 respectively as well. So that's what that means. We've had that for a number of years.
Okay, so I'd like to just go to the gate receipts for a moment. The gate receipt revenue is 50% of what we pull down from the sports high school level for which we charge, and we dedicate that amount of money to our athletic reserve fund. We 50% to district, 50% to our fund. Also, we'll talk about E-rate. E-rate is a reimbursement federal funding stream, and we are using this quite substantially this summer to make some network improvements at Smith School and here at Hampden Academy. You do get reimbursed based on your projects, and the reimbursement amounts continue to decline. So we're trying to capitalize now where we know it's at the highest it's going to be for quite some time, and continue to utilize the money in that fashion as best we can. That's why we do see that we have a bit of a decrease in our E-rate revenue. Anything you'd like to add, Nate, about that?
No, I think you got it.
IRS interest reimbursement also is declining, and that in part is because of us paying less for our interest payments, because many of our projects are paying down. Expense reimbursement for a variety of things. We have fuel tax reimbursement. We have Newburgh that pays us back for some of the services that we provide out at the site. And we also have virtual high school courses, and we sell seats to other schools. We have had a challenge in selling seats in VHS because there are so many new ways you can be taking classes and access college programs early. VHS isn't the hot ticket it used to be, so we will continue to look at that and decide how we integrate VHS in the future. We have miscellaneous. We have a Coke contract where we aren't selling soda on campus, but we certainly are bringing down revenue for having their water here, especially for the food program. And then we have main care reimbursement, which is similar to state agency compliant, where you have to bill for those services related to students who are eligible for main care, and they have to be very particular services, generally occupational therapy. So we have to bill in 15-minute increments, and it's getting more challenging for the state to approve the billings. And then we come to tuition. We have just about 40 to 45 students who have accepted to come to Hampden Academy next year, which is fantastic. We are projecting an increase in revenue because of those strong numbers, and so we look forward to welcoming those students here. And so you can see as this all comes to a close, we then look down at the assessment column to determine what we will generate for a local assessment, and it comes to a 4.34% increase. The turf payment did come online in the FY20 budget, and so that is what you see there for the increase of the local without state participation. That's part of the increase there. Questions? Yes?
I seem to be the only one here to ask questions. I'm sorry about that. I'd heard through grapevine, so I don't know if this is true or not, that at one point the district was looking at doing an after-school program that was not affiliated with the town rec program.
Yes.
Did that indeed happen?
That is going to happen this fall. We're going to have a program at Smith School. We
Or
had-
will it be at Smith?
No, we had an open house at Smith 2 weeks ago, and then next Thursday night, we're having one at Weatherby and McGraw. The program is called Champions, where parents can choose to enroll their child on a tuition basis and determine the amount of time they want their child to attend. It's a year-round program. They also have a scale whereby it works like free and reduced lunch fare. You can reduce your tuition based on your income and things like that. So it'll be an option for parents to participate. We also have Kids Corner that will be operating to supplement that program as well. Kids Corner will be housed at the skiing center at the old Hampden Academy. Champions will be at Weatherby, McGraw, and Smith School.
Is the one at Hampden Academy that's through the town?
Yes, it is. Yes, yeah.
What's your projected revenue from Champions for the different schools?
We will-
Is that included?
No, it's not. We really don't know, to tell you the truth, because we don't know how many enrollees will be there. So that gets back to your earlier question. Whatever we have for revenue, we'll be putting miscellaneous revenue, moving to the FY21 budget.
Is there a setup so that it'll only take so many students? I mean, what's that
No, that
supposed
question,
to look like?
that question was answered down in Smith the other night, and the question was, how low do you go? And the regional rep in New England mentioned if they had 5 students, they would run the program.
So anywhere from 5 to what would be their maximum?
I think their maximum, I believe, don't quote me on this, is 15 to 16, I believe, but don't quote me.
At each school?
Yes, at least, yes.
And the reason for doing that was?
To provide options for parents, because we've had a number of parents over the years request, in addition to the Kids Corner and the Y program, what else are there for options? And the answer at that time was none.
Is that going to be a before and after school program or just after?
After at Smith, because Smith School starts at 7:45 in the morning, but with Weatherby and McGraw, before and after, yes.
And after.
We also went to visit up in the county. Prescott and Holden have had the programs for 2 years, and they've had great success with it.
With Champions?
Yes.
And who provides that service? I mean, that's a whole different entity from the district?
It-
You
it's
have
a-
no control?
No, it's a
over
private
hires
entity.
or-
It's a private entity. They basically use our facilities. They deliver all the materials. They hire all the people, and we provide the children.
So your income is generated by?
The revenue that they receive and the return on their investment. So this will be our first year of pilot, so next year at this time, I'll be able to answer your question exactly.
I'm going to ask
Yeah.
from the town's point of view, are they concerned by this?
I would say initially they were, and Mrs. Nichols can help me, because Kids Corner was housed, as you all know, at Weatherby School for approximately 20 years. The Y program was housed at Smith. I met with them, and we've offered them to go to Wagner School. So they will be relocated, there's no question. That was not their desire, but nevertheless, the program will continue to operate. Mrs. Nichols met with the people from the town a couple of weeks ago, and one of the issues they had was the transportation for the children from Hampden Academy over to the schools, and we're going to provide the transportation. Likewise, the program down to Winterport, we're going to provide the transportation for the children from Smith School up to Wagner School as well. So we've tried to extend the cooperative effort, if you will, even recognizing that they were saddened to be relocated, probably the best way to say that.
So they're being transported, the district is paying for that transportation?
Yes.
Basically, it's just from one school to the next, is what you're saying?
Yeah, brought from Henry Academy over to the elementary schools, and then down to Winterport from the Smith School up to Wagner.
And you said Champions to be housed at?
Champion's going to be housed at those 3 elementary schools.
At the 3
Yeah.
elementary schools.
Smith, Wagner, and McGraw.
What's the?
I'm sorry, no, let me say that again.
Right.
Smith, Weatherby,
I
and
knew
McGraw.
that when you said. I
Thank
didn't
you, sir.
know
That's
that.
good.
I just
Thank you.
went, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's the comparable cost for parents at that point between, let's say, the Kids Corner versus this Champions?
I'm not familiar with Kids Corner, so I'll have to ask someone else to chime in on what the tuition is for Kids
Well,
Corner.
it's a challenge to answer because Champions offers a sliding scale. So depending on the participants' parents' income level, there may be subsidy that's afforded to them. So I do have a chart with the Champions costs that I could actually email you if you're interested in seeing.
No, that's okay. And what is the liability for the district with this program, or is there none?
There is not.
They cover all of that. So if anything were to occur on school grounds in your buildings. you
Just like any other person that uses our facility, they have to take out
Right, they have to take
an
out-
insurance policy, that's
Right.
correct. Yeah. And they're their employees, they're not our employees.
Does that concern you?
No. Matter of fact, it excites me to tell you the truth, because let me put my parent hat on for a minute. If I'm a parent of a child 5 to 10 years old, this gives me an opportunity to select from 3 different programs. The Y, Kids Corner, or Champions. Nothing mandates that I participate in any or all 3. And the Champions program, if I want my child to go on Monday and Wednesday this week, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week, that's how we design it, as long as I let them know the Wednesday before the following week. It's a year-round program. It's academic-based and socially based and recreationally based. So that during the 1.5, 2-hour session, you can have sit-down, there can be technology, they can be out and running and playing and so on. They have a very attractive student-teacher ratio. Usually they try to hire local people, which is what they did in Holton and Presque Isle. The best example is what we found in Holton and Presque Isle. A lot of educational technicians are attracted to it because it's before their workday or after their workday. So I'm very excited about it. I'm very optimistic it's going to give we as parents an option to be a participant or not be a participant. And I think,
I'd like to add something too.
what?
I'd like to add something too. As a Newburgh resident, didn't have an option for my kids to go to Kids Corner in Hampden nor the Y bus in Winterport. So this definitely is an extra option for us living in Newburgh. And I think I remember the presentation where they talked about the people that they hire going through the certification process too. So their fingerprint check, background check. So that's comforting. And me and my wife will definitely be looking at this next fall as an option too.
I'm glad Nate brought that up, because that explanation also will be applicable for Frankfort. So our 2 communities that really had an option, had an option in the past, now will have an option.
Do parents have to sign some kind of contract so you'll be able to project income?
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth, because I'm really not involved in the minutia of it and the details.
Okay, thank you.
There have been times also that the Kids Corner has filled up over the years too, and I don't know, and there were no options.
Right.
So
Yeah, they have
I don't
had
know if
yeah.
that's the case now, but there have been years past.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back, though, to the number of students that can be served by
Mhm.
each of the programs.
Mhm.
I think it's higher than
Is
15
it higher
or
than that?
16,
Yeah.
yes. That's what we currently have enrolled, I know, at Smith School for next year already,
Yeah.
16 to 17
Yeah.
children. And I'm not sure that they have a cap. I think what happens is it becomes dependent on their ability to hire and have
Okay,
the
yes, thank you. Yeah.
correct ratios. But we can check into that for you.
That's okay, I was just curious.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
One more opinion on that, Faye, those are great questions. My personal opinion is I think that may be a magnet for people looking to move to a school district. What options do I have for my child before? I mean, let's go back 10 years ago. We didn't have public pre-K in RSU 22. And now we enroll approximately 90 children that 10 years ago didn't have the opportunity. And I think that theme, if you will, really supplements the effort to bring champions in to augment the Kids Corner and the Y program.
Is your pre-K maxed out at this point?
If it's not maxed out, it's close. The Winnipore program's all day long, and the McGraws are half day. So again, parents have great options.
One quick question, were the discrepancies in the contract amended so that we have a tight contract
Yes,
now?
they-
Because there were some.
Yes, they were.
Okay, good. Because there were some issues.
Yes, there were, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so we'll move on from this slide.
Excuse me.
The next slide is showing gross budget variances over the years. And you can see that we have an average of 3.3% across the years in RSU 22. The spikes around 2012, of course, relate to the building of the new Hampden Academy. And so we did see an injection of debt service in those years. So here's our slide related to our unallocated fund balance history. You can see the number I referred to, the 1.9 million that was audited in FY18. We did dedicate the 440,000 to the budget going into FY19. We also dedicated 275 to our capital reserve. And you can see on FY20, we're introducing the small purple bar there. We'd like to start Technology Reserve Fund, and that is $50,000 we're recommending toward the purchase of new accounting software that will be required. All districts that are utilizing the ProFund software that RSU 22 uses will need to be transitioning. So we'll be making a significant change, not only in the platform, but also in having to fund that.
This committee also discussed over a number of years, actually, by state law, you cannot carry more than 3% of an unassigned fund balance. You have to expend it over a 3-year period. And I've also made the claim to the budget committee that that's a good problem to have because you can resolve it in 2 seconds by moving the money to the capital reserve accounts. But nevertheless, that is the law.
And how is your budget for this year? Are you on target for this year? Are you over budget, under budget at this point as of May 1st or June 1st of this year?
We will see a carryover
Right.
From this year's budget.
You will have carryover?
Yes. I would just like to speak to capital reserve for a moment. We are increasing the amount of capital reserve dedication. We started that last year by asking for 275 instead of the typical 150 of the past. And the reason for that, and we're going to continue that ask again this year, is that RSU 22 has had amazing fortune with pulling down school revolving renovation funds, SRRF. And those are for scored projects that the state evaluates, and they determine if you qualify to get such funds. And they typically are interest free, and a portion of that is actually paid back by the state. But for the past 2 years, there has been zero funded for SRRF from the state. And this year in the state budget, we are seeing that there's 20 million that we're anticipating. And so we will jump on applying for that. But because we've had this shortfall in these 2 years of having those funds to apply for, we have to make up what the maintenance still is costing to get some of these projects underway. So that is our strategy here, to make sure we're in a good position if the money either dries up again or if our projects don't qualify for the 20 million that's going to be put forth.
So what did you say you were putting for capital reserve?
We're putting forth, we're recommending 275,000, but we will have a little over 600,000 in our capital reserve fund.
It's
Slide
Article
31.
7.
We'll be there
Article
soon.
17 in your booklet.
Oh, I knew I read it somewhere, but I couldn't remember where.
Slide
Thanks.
34 in your packet.
Article 18, I'm sorry.
I always jump ahead before, I'm a little anxious, I guess, I don't know.
Okay, any questions on the fund balance?
Let me just interject a thought right here. Regan, I hope it's timing. I sit here, I share with the committee sometimes futuristically. We're looking on the FY20 budget, but I'm looking ahead, of which I don't want to be here. But anyway, this is where I want to go with my thought. The legislature has endorsed the minimum salary of $40,000.
Right.
So when this committee develops the budget next year, I'm predicting that we're probably going to have $250,000 in increase in funds to bring those teachers up to $35,600 up to $40,000. That's going to be a quantum leap in 1 year. So my basic point is simple. We can take a deep breath, but next year at this time, we're going to have to address that ramping up, because the first year, the state will pay 2/3 of that. The next year, 1/3, and 3 years down the road, all those monies then will come to the responsibility of the local school district. That's going to be a big factor we have to consider. And that, what made me think about that is the fund balance. We may have to utilize that. And I know Trish is sitting there unnerved by this, because $500,000 for a designated fund balance, that's large.
Yeah.
Because guess what? That raises the bar for the next year. You have to sustain that $500,000. And having them designated fund balance is advantageous, because that gives us some mobility there.
When that kicks in, is that going to be the same year that you're going to go back for negotiations? How,
Yes, it is. We are in the second year, final year of our teacher contract.
this is the final year?
This coming year.
Or this coming?
FY20. And also will be the conclusion of our support staff. So we'll be negotiating 2 contracts this coming year. But irrespective of contracts, now the state mandated $40,000 minimum salary, we have to abide by that.
How's that going to impact the rest of the state?
That's
I'm
a good-
assuming that'll all be under
That's a great question.
Because you're not just talking about raising the base at that point.
It's a great question.
The state's phasing that in over 3 years, is that correct?
Yeah, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, yeah.
Yep.
But you hit dead on, because if you know how teacher salaries work, let me make it up. Let me just make it up. Let's say step 1 is 41,000, but now all of a sudden step 0 is 40,000. So what's that do with your steps up through 17? We don't have what we call an index scale, though. In other words, an index scale is where you have a built-in percentage between each step. We don't have that. We have a set number. But we'll see what negotiations does, and we'll commence that probably in the March 2020 timeframe.
Our next slide is doing a comparison of each of the budget categories, RSU 22, related to state spending. And the most recent data collected is for FY18, of course, because we haven't concluded this year's budget. But you can see that RSU 22 is your purple, with the state being the darker red. And RSU 22 is comparable in most categories. Regular instruction, you see that we are spending less per pupil. Special education, we're right about on. CTE education, we are slightly less. And as our representative, Alan Gordon, can share with you that our region for CTE is receiving significantly less funding than many other regions are, to the detriment of our programs, due to a hold harmless clause, which we can talk about later. Most other categories are quite comparable. Our debt service, if you jump over, is higher, of course, because of the new Hampden Academy. Our school lunch program has been self-sustaining, and we are continuing that and not supporting it through the local budget. All right, we're going to get started with discussion of the particular articles, and I'm going to go ahead and share 2 slides on the PowerPoint, then we'll get into our Link 22. And look at it there. So you can see from this slide a few pieces of information. We certainly break down for you what the cost in each of the categories is for FY20 as compared to FY19, what the increase or decrease has been for each of the articles, along with the percentage of increase, decrease, and then the percentage of the total budget that that article serves. So for instance, Article 1 is increasing by 4%. It is 35.5% of our total budget. This slide is just a different way of looking at that same type of information as a pie graph to see which pieces of the budget are most significant overall. All right. I'm going to have us look at the link 22, and we'll talk about each of the articles this way instead of going through PowerPoint, unless there's something on a PowerPoint slide you'd like to discuss. Each of the articles in the link 22 handout gives you the subcategories that are within each of the articles, and I think that's important for you to be able to look over and understand what is inside each of the categories, because many times the category name does not articulate what you're actually paying for. So regular instruction includes both elementary and secondary instruction aspects. We do fund pre-K through that, as well as English language learners, gifted and talented, alternative ed, and we then have bullet points that list all of the significant factors that are present in each of the articles. In Article 1 this year, we have had increases in all salary lines. We did negotiate a new contract last year, and we are in the second year of that. And so we're going to enter the second year in FY20. So we will be adjusting salaries for those agreements, along with tuition reimbursement. We pay for 9 credits per professional faculty member who wishes to pursue, and we making sure that that is adequately funded there. We have an increase to books and periodicals. We have many curriculum pieces that need to be updated on a routine basis or are web-based, and so we need to make sure our licenses are in line for those. We have dues and fees for pre-K to 8. Dues and fees I'd like to talk about is NEAS. We have accredited our high school and our 2 middle schools. We have made a decision next year to look at an accreditation-like activity for Weatherby and McGraw School. That would mean that the Blue Ribbon Commission would come in and survey the staff of both schools together as one unit and talk about school improvement. Smith School has been under a school improvement grant for a few years, and they've had substantial input to their school through that mechanism, so we aren't including them right now with the Blue Ribbon activities because they've already had it through the state. We did transfer computing costs into Article 1 this year at the request of the state. They've asked that the student computers that we're going to be purchasing for our high school students as well as our 6th graders, because they have turned out to have a lifetime that was exactly projected. So they're about 4 or 5 years old, Nate?
4 years old.
4 years old, and so we're getting new Chromebooks for the students next year. We also are putting in a behavioral consultant and analyst position. This is a position that would do 2 to 3 different functions. We know that there's student behavior that is getting increasingly challenging for teachers to not only manage in some cases, but also just simply know how to interface with a student when they arrive at the school, often new. And so we'll bring this on board in hopes it'll be a new resource. And then we'll have a Grantwriter position. And this position will be a position that looks regionally for grants, and we will be able to share some of these costs with other school districts that are interested in participating with us through our regional programming to bring down money from outside sources for many programs that require larger enrollments than RSU 22 alone could sustain, or for programs that we know we need somebody to be very well aware of how the grants are written and what aspects we need to be tracking. Yes?
So I'm going to ask a question. The BCBA, will that person be able to work with students who are not under the special ed umbrella?
That's why we put it in Article 1.
That's why I was asking.
Yes, it's a great question because we were originally considering it for Article 2, but it was too restrictive. And many of the times, the children aren't identified yet. So we've been strategic in that way to have it in Article 1.
The primary focus for the BCBA will be at the lower levels?
Right now, we're focusing on Smith School as the primary recipient of the time with consultant work in Hampden, and then consider if the middle schools need any of that time as well. But Smith School and Winterport will be the primary.
Reason being?
We've had considerable transients in the population in Winterport and Frankfort, so we want to be sure that we have somebody on the ground that can help with evaluating students who are coming into the school, both new but also young, and aren't able to always communicate what their needs are, nor have they been in programs to evaluate yet what their needs could be. So we feel like this is a resource that could be very well used at Smith School.
Will that person's primary role be evaluation, or will it be teacher support or student support?
We're aiming that this will be teacher support and then student support, and that this position would give us information to start evaluations through other avenues, but help to guide how that would come together.
Will there be a referral process for that also?
There'd have to be a referral process if we're going to engage in trying to get an identification, for instance, through special education. We do have a social worker, though, at Smith School through Pathways, and we also would be working to try to make sure those connections are being made simultaneously.
Is there a social worker at any of the schools?
Yes. We have a social worker here at the high school, quite substantially. In our middle schools, we have our Pathways social work connections, and we are talking with Acadia about further social work that would branch out from the high school and serve middle schools as well. And then I believe at Weatherby School also, we have connections with Pathways.
Is that Pathways is an outside agency?
Yes,
correct?
and
Yeah.
they are quite tied to main care, but they do have 2 to 3 slots they can serve for students that aren't qualified.
So this person would service students who perhaps might not be able to go under Pathways?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can you tell me how, like the last 2 positions, where did those reflect in the numbers above? Like the Grantwriter position, where would I see that? Which line?
That would be would it be split between elementary and secondary? She'll look it up exactly for you.
Oh,
but
I
we
was just
split-
wondering, those last 2 positions, I was just wondering where it reflected into the numbers.
We split positions like that because
Okay.
you think about where you're actually going to use them most substantially. So we know that the grant writer would be a district-wide view, so we would split between secondary and elementary.
Okay.
And then for the BCBA, we know we're going to use it primarily at elementary, but there might be some middle school,
Okay.
secondary.
All right. So what's the jump in the gifted and talented?
That is benefits adjustment, I believe. When people working in that category make a shift in their benefits, for instance, a full family insurance package is in excess of $20,000. So that's where you see the shift, and then there'd be salary increases there as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't need the other details, the split's good enough information.
Okay.
The last 2 positions, my last question regarding that is, are they going to be on the teacher pay scale, or will they be paid based on another criteria?
The latter.
On another criteria?
Be similar to like your nurses who are not on the pay scale, in the collective bargaining contract, sometimes, yeah, or your social workers. So they would not be in the collective bargaining contract.
And will they be under a contract similar to, will they have a teacher's contract so that they have the same kinds of benefits that teachers have, like continuing education and so forth?
It would probably be somewhat similar, but I wouldn't say exactly though, Fed. It'd be somewhat similar.
I think the BCBA would be quite close to a teacher
Yeah.
contract. The grant writer is an interesting position because there are sometimes when you have a percentage of your pull-down is part of your pay, so we'll be creative with that, and we're also going to be communicating with the other districts who are interested.
Also, just a reminder, if we can get added to a regional component, we also get a greater return from the state for regionalization. For example, in the budget this year, we had $152,000 because we had the regionalization concept. So hopefully this can support that as well.
I just want to just make sure I understand. The grant writing position, that's not a set salary? You haven't decided on that particularly yet? Because sometimes grant writers, I know, like you said, the percentage, because you could write all the grants in the world and you don't get any money for it, and you're paying this person $50,000. But so lots of times it's a percentage, so that's something we're going to be looking into. Okay, good.
We are going to be discussing that, and
Okay.
right now, we're interested, Bangor School Department is utilizing a grant writer and is having great success.
Right.
And so we want to be in conversation with them about how they're structuring that contract and talk to other districts who have done this as well.
Okay.
And try to make the most of it, but be fair to the person as well.
Right. Okay.
And before we leave Article 1, as a point of reference, the percentage increase for this year in the negotiated contract was like 4.89% for the teachers, or something in that?
Yes, in that
4.89,
range.
4.9?
I think,
I thought a previous issue of Link 22, it was in that range.
if my memory serves me correctly, I think it's a little bit lower than that. I thought it was like
Four-
I think it's
4.2,
4.24.
4.3. if I
Okay,
recall.
4.2,
Yeah,
4.3.
yeah,
but
yeah.
It was less than 5. I remember.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Article 2. So in Article 2, you can see these subgroups there, and beyond special education teachers are broken down into categories in which they teach. So we have resource room, we have self-contained, and then we move into hospital and homebound instruction for students who are unable to attend school and may need to be either tutored or being served in a medical hospital environment. We have social workers, psychological services along with speech and language. We have occupational therapy, audiology, physical therapy, and then special education administration along with APE, which is adapted physical education. And in RSU 22, our PE teachers teach the APE. So we take a very small portion of their salary and place it here to cover those periods in which they teach APE. So what we have in Article 2 is that we have had an increase across the salary lines. We had an increase in the contracted psychological services cost this year. And we had an increase in the hospitalization homebound, because for the past 2 to 3 years, we have been over in those expenses in our budget. And in Finance Committee this year, we tracked that and decided to make good projections. And we are seeing an increase in students. We are seeing that the tuition reimbursement for the courses special education teachers wish to take needed to be increased, along with an increase in occupational therapy services. The BCBA that you saw in Article 1, that conversation came organically from special education. That's where we started talking about it. But we recognize those students who need those services can also get them through the funding in Article 1. We also are in the midst right now of making a decision about special education teacher being funded potentially at Weatherby School. Their case management numbers are very high, and so that cost would come from Article 2. We feel as though our budget is in a place where with some of the shifts in staff that we're seeing, it will be able to cover that.
So you're not saying it's an increase in a person, you're just simply saying a shift in people?
There would be an increase in a person, but because of the shifts in how people are being hired and coming online at different salary rates, that we would be fine, yeah.
And as far as the psychological services, that's simply because the agency you use has increased their fees?
Yes.
So you're not increasing the amount of time that you'll be able to utilize them?
Correct.
Correct.
Any other questions? right, Article 3 is at 0 because CTE is now funded directly to the region.
Right.
And so it no longer flows through. They do require that we maintain this article at 0, and I would say the reason that they're doing that is that in the future, there may be assessments that need to come to the local school districts from the region, but we are not being asked for that now. Any comment you want to make about?
No, there's no plans to ask for a local share. I think some other units are.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move to Article 4. So Article 4 is one of these articles that has a title that doesn't really describe what's inside of it. Article 4 is other instruction. What's really in there is summer school costs that are non-special ed. We have elementary and secondary co-curricular clubs and experiences. We have graduation expenses for Hampden Academy. And then we have our extracurriculars, which would be our athletics. So what we see in this article this year, we do have an increase due to an increase in stipends and associated benefits for our coaches and advisors. We did make some adjustments in the transportation budgeting for these events because there are just simply costs of running buses for all of these trips and programs. And we also found that we had some programs that were happening during the year. For instance, we would have an event here at the PAC that the high schoolers are putting on, and we'd want to bring the younger kids from Wagner or Smith School, and we hadn't budgeted for the money to do so, so we've done that now, so that we have the co-curricular integration in both communities. And we also have an increase in officials. It is harder and harder to find officials for some of our sports, and we're having to ask people to come from further away at times. And so we've integrated those increases here in our budget. And then athletic trainer services are going to return to our middle schools. A couple of years ago, we had trialed some services that were going well. Last year, we had some reduction in those, and we're bringing them back online. So the middle schools can expect that they'll see trainers at not every single contest, just at HA. We don't cover every contest, but the contests such as football, soccer, basketball, the things that we know would have concussion-related injuries, we're going to be covering those this year. Plus, we'll have consultant services coming to the buildings to follow up on students who may have suffered injury. And then we have some support in the budget. The board over the years has supported events like Globals for Destination Imagination or for robotics. And we haven't necessarily budgeted those costs in. This year we have budgeted money so that if those events occur and we have that achievement level for our clubs, we want to be able to support them and go. Any questions on that? Yes?
Can you explain the summer school program, please?
We have very limited summer school programming for students who are not qualified for special education. This primarily happens at Smith School in Winterport. And we actually have a school nutrition program down there that can help to feed any students that come to visit the school even. And then we can currently run a small summer school program for reading and math skills.
Is that your Title I?
We do have Title I support that also runs through that program, but this $3,000 is separate from that Title I. It allows us to bring in the students who don't qualify for Title I. Okay, Article 5, student and staff support. And inside is a smorgasbord of different activities in our school district. So we have guidance, student health services, which includes our nurses, instructional related technology. We have charter school commission. We do not operate a charter school, so we're zero there. We have 504 expenses, other student support. We have intervention services, improvement of instruction, which is our curriculum office, instructional staff training, which is professional development facilitated by our local budget, library services in all of our schools, and then assessment, and that is where we pay for assessment services like NWA. So we have had salary and benefit increases for our nurses, our guidance, and then we're having a decrease in technology printing costs, so we've made the adjustment there. Nate, is there anything you want to add about technology?
Any questions?
Any questions? Yeah.
I think I have one in regards to, I was at the Rick's report of the district at one of the school board meetings, and math was certainly a concern at that meeting, and based on the numbers, it needed to be a concern. What in this budget is working at improving math instruction at all levels? I mean, I understand you're math coach at the Winterport schools, I understand that type of thing, but what's happening with the rest of the teachers who might be struggling teaching math?
Well, what we have done in Article 1 is when you go back to the increase to books and periodicals, we've tried to beef up the budget there so that the resources and materials people need, we're guaranteeing that they have them.
I understand the resources are there, but what's happening with
Professional development, you mean?
professional development in that area?
I think also it's
And where is that in
I
here?
think also there's a new curriculum,
Yeah.
and
Right,
the
I knew
new
about that.
curriculum, this is the second year, I believe, correct?
Yes.
And in my experience, it's about 4 years before you'll really see a big difference in,
Right.
in those numbers. I mean, you
Right.
are aware of that, so
I've been there. Yeah,
Right, me too. So, so I do think that I mean, they've seen some growth this year, and I think that will continue once the children that started out, they start progressing along. You know, it's kind of hard that first year, you're not going to see that kind of growth.
And I understand that.
Right. So I think that-
Like I said, I've been there, done that.
Right.
My concern is what are teachers getting on a yearly basis? I mean, I'm a classroom teacher, I'm struggling in teaching math. Yes, I've got all the materials, yes, I've got the new books, yes, I've got the manuals, yes, I've got that. But what kind of help are we giving them on a yearly basis to say, okay, what are your concerns and how can I help you?
Well, I think there's an instructional coach that can help with some of that, and I also think this math coach is going to make a big difference
Because
with that.
that's the embedded professional development. So these coaches go into the classroom, they work with the teachers. It's not an interventionist, it
Okay.
is a coach. So it's embedded what each teacher needs. It's very specific to the school, the students in that classroom, and that teacher.
And the teacher. And
Okay,
I think
so
the
how many
big,
coaches do you
big
have?
difference with coaching too is that you really work with the teacher, the specific teacher, what that teacher's strengths are, and what maybe they're not so great at, they're not as comfortable with.
Uncomfortable.
And that coach will really build on the strengths they have to help with those deficits.
So how many
And I-
coaches do you have?
Excuse me?
How many coaches do you
Well,
have?
this new one is the one we're beefing up this year.
Well, you happen to be sitting by our
Well, I
current
used to be
instructional
something,
coach,
but I wasn't quite sure what.
You have the one that's right there.
I'm a half-time instructional coach.
Right, half-time
Right.
for
But
grades, what through what?
that you don't want to know.
No, that's my point.
K through 12 instructional coach. But that's where this is very specific to math, to Winterport, and it would be doing coaching cycles with teachers. So a coaching cycle could look like a 3 to 6 week time. You might, a math coach could have 3 to 4 cycles going at a time, 3 to 4 teachers. So in Winterport right now, I have gone through and done some of that. And actually Amanda has just finished the math coaching program through UMath. And she also has been going in and working with teachers. So we're really trying to target Winterport and math, but I also am doing math. So I really think we're trying as hard as we
Well,
can.
and I'm sure you
but the
are. I don't
budget-
mean it to
But the
sound like
budget,
you're not.
no. But that's where the professional development comes in.
Okay.
So.
And then there's another unique aspect, which we haven't gotten to yet, but I'll just talk about it now. We're going to recommend a dean of students position in this
Right, I
budget.
saw that.
Okay? And are thinking about the dean of students is to free up the principals of the middle schools to be out in classrooms more, so that they are talking with teachers and helping to also observe instruction and have teachers reflect on their instruction with them, so that we're starting to have those dialogues much more consistently and hopefully frequently than we have been able to, because I think the increasing demands on administrator time with discipline, behavior issues,
I've been there too.
Yes. So I do hope that this new position is going to help with some of that, because, there are some teachers who are at a place where they just want to be able to have the moment to reflect with somebody about how they're using materials, what their students are presenting to them, and they may not need the coaching cycle as much as someone else. So we're just going to try to balance those and learn how they could dovetail with each other.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Article 6. This is system administration. And you can see the subtotals there. We have our board of directors, the staff relations and negotiations subcategory, executive administration, which is the superintendent's office, and then the central office fiscal side, which is the business office. And what we see in the budget this year is an increase to legal services. We have recognized through projections and looking at past expenditures that we needed to make increases there. We do have the transition of Superintendent Lyons to his retirement in the FY20 budget, and so he will have a vacation payout that we'll need to see through. We have salary and benefit increases, and we also are looking to have the superintendent's salary, which is currently being paid to Mr. Lyons at 75% of what his superintendent's salary was due to his retirement. We'll need to be making it marketable for the next superintendent coming along. And then we have postage and printing increases. We had Link 22 that we send out 4 times a year, and we had postage metering which we needed to make adjustments for.
Okay, let's talk about Article 6. I think I've been in a lot of these, and I think many of you who've heard me speak know that Article 6 is probably one of the things that I feel strongly about, and I think it may be the bump in the road come Thursday.
Okay.
And the reason I think it's going to be the bump in the road come Thursday is because, although it's not reported in the paper we're looking at, the Board of Directors increase is 13%, and the System Administration increase is 9.4%. And I think those percentages, you just need to be sensitive, are going to be an issue with the public. Because, again, and I spoke to this at a previous meeting, it's the perception when teachers are getting what we heard now is 4.2%, whatever that is, it's under 5, and the school board is getting a 13% increase to their budget, and the system administration. Now, you already addressed the fact why you're trying to do system administration, and I respect that, but I think, at least at one point, I think you had a more powerful argument that I would encourage you to use, and that's the fact that statewide, our system administration is apparently less.
Yes.
That's the argument I think you need to use to strengthen your argument for system administration increase, or at least mention it, okay? Because trying to adjust the baseline salary, well, I think that's a noble cause, doesn't carry a lot of weight when you're only giving teachers a 4.2% pay raise. So be sure you do that. But the board issue is a little bit more challenging. I don't know the details in there, but I can tell you, for those of you over there, I'm a town council member, and our town council budget is 1/3 what the school board budget is. Now, I know we're comparing apples and oranges, but there's comparable kinds of responsibilities, and I know your school board is much bigger than our town council, okay? But I think we want to be careful about why the 13% increase, because if you look at the town council budget, there's going to be an increase as well. But the increase that we're seeing in Hampden is due to the support services for our audiovisual people. And we know that's what it is, and that detail's not in here. So I'm just telling you, the bump in the road Thursday is probably going to be Article 6 because of the percentages and the message it sends to the public about the differences in the percentage increase, so for what it's worth.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up and peeling away the layers of the onion so we can know what to expect. And I would say to you that my relaying of how things are laid out in Article 6 is an attempt to be entirely transparent.
Oh, I don't
about
think you're
what it
hiding
is.
anything, but the percentages are out there when you go into detail
So
on the
let's
website.
look at them.
Yep, and that's where people are picking up the differences in the percentages. I'm not suggesting it's being hidden, but on the website,
Thank
it's
you.
13% and 9.4%, and we just heard that it's 4.2% for the teachers.
And your point's well taken, and if you look at page 20 of the handout, the assistant administration is about $100 less than the state.
You know, I think that's what I'm saying. That's a very valid argument. That's the argument I think we want to stress.
Right.
And another primary, we'll call it argument if you want to, is that what is going on in the Board of Directors portion of the budget is not salary. Okay? So I just want to talk about those things right now so that people do understand what we have inside of this.
I would like to understand that.
So for Article 6, Board of Directors subtopic, I just want to list for you what literally is in there. It's not salary related. The closest we come to that is Board of Directors stipends. Board of Directors stipends are about $4,800 a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't expect it to be much. It's all the other things that aren't in there that you don't know about, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to tell them. Okay. We have contracted services, so that if we wanted to, for instance, I'm interested in hiring a speaker for our opening management day for all of the staff to hear from. And so that would be a place that the money would come from. We have professional development for our board of directors at about $1,600 a year. We send interested members to our main school management school board association conference in Augusta, and we try to get at least 4 to 6 people there a year if we can. We have legal services, and this is the most substantial part of the board of directors subtopic. We have legal services that are not related to negotiations, and we fund that at about $40,000 a year. And we know that legal services can be used for a laundry list of things, depending on what happens or transpires during a year. Our audit is paid for out of the board of directors subtopic, and so our audit is actually having a continued contract price. We're not seeing an increase for that. We have insurance, board liability insurance. We do have travel for board of directors members who may want to attend a conference, and we have about $1,300 for travel if someone's attending. We have supplies. We do put in for supplies for the copies, the packets, all those items that the school board is receiving or needs to utilize. And then we have dues and fees, different associations that we have our board be members with to not only educate us, but also to give us consultation services or reference points when we need information. So that sums up the board of directors total and where those increases are.
And that detail is important, but what I would do Thursday is pick the 2 that have really impacted that
I will.
that line. You know, just, I think the more information the better, but you don't want to overwhelm them. So I'm saying what you want to say is what's really contributing to this. My guess is legal is probably one of them, if I had to guess.
That's true, that's true.
And then whatever, maybe the other one, just say, you know, there's a lot of things that go into this, and here's 2 examples that have really contributed to this, the increase in this particular line, and I think that solves the question for the public.
Your point's well taken, but in the spirit of being transparent and personalizing this, the other flip side to that is the superintendent's salary is 25% over the last 3 years than what it was 3 years ago. So in other words, even though you have the time of increase, likewise, you also had a time of decrease in the salary of the superintendent of schools.
And you're right.
I know what you're saying.
I'm just trying to strengthen
I hear
our
you, I hear
position.
you, I hear you.
Please,
Yeah.
understand.
I hear you.
Okay, anything else for Article 6? And I do appreciate that, because I do think the more articulate and to the point we
Right.
are for people who have questions, the more trust we're building in doing that.
That's right.
Okay, we'll move on to Article 7, and that is school administration. And you don't have significant subtopics in school administration because it is the cost of principals and their offices. So we are having an increase in salaries for principals. We are seeing a new position come online for Dean of Students at Wagner and Reedsbrook, and that will be one shared position. The intent of that position is what I was speaking to earlier, freeing up principals to be instructional leaders in their school, be much more in touch with instruction that's occurring on a day-to-day basis, and building relationships with teachers and students.
Will that be a 50-50 split?
Yes, that is our hope, 50-50
Yeah.
split. But we are going to be advising the principals that as this comes online, we want to hear more about what they're seeing in that position and if that 50-50 was the right assumption to make. We had a decrease in benefits for principals because we had recategorization of benefits because we have principals who have spouses who are teachers. And in the teacher's contract, we are able to facilitate some sharing of the benefits in a different way than through a principal's contract. So we swung those benefits where they needed to go for the contractual purposes. And then we have an increase in software support and maintenance for each of the buildings for student management systems.
So on the Dean of Students, you have talked about the behavioral aspect of it, but it's my understanding there's an athletic component to that work also.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We do see that there is a dovetail with the athletic department and how we can potentially maybe not cover all of the duties that are provided for right now by our athletic directors, but certainly take on some of those duties, or in part we may find that it does work. So we're going to be looking into that.
And you may be interested in increasing in the principal salaries. We have budgeted 3% for principals.
Any other questions?
Does that mean there's going to be a decrease by not in salary by not having the middle school athletic directors?
We have not. We are maintaining the athletic director positions right
Yes,
now
right.
while we investigate how this is going to work. We want to make sure that all systems are go, and then we'll start seeing where things can potentially result in a reduction.
So will this person's role be a lot of it behavioral?
We're thinking that it will be substantial, well, substantially is probably too strong, but significantly behavioral, and then also logistical, scheduling, maybe taking on role of, safety in the school. We want to see what each principal feels like is the best fit, depending on what time of day they have this person, how many days per week do they have the person, and go from there. Okay, Article 8, transportation. We do see a reduction in transportation this year, and you can see the subgroups are student transportation and special education transportation. Our decrease is coming from two things. That we have transportation costs that we've had for tuition students. We've run vans specifically to Glenburn. And we know next year we'll only need to be running one instead of running two. And that is not necessarily because we're seeing less students from Glenburn, it's that they're getting their licenses and they're preferring to transport themselves. But we also are seeing a decrease in our fuel costs for diesel. You know, throughout this year, we paid anywhere from $2.61 a gallon up to $2.84 a gallon for diesel. Next year, we've locked in at a price at $2.35 to $2.22. We have tiered contracts, so we're going to have a lower fuel cost. We also intend to purchase a used van for our school fleet. We purchased one last year, and we're looking to make another purchase so that every year we're having renewal in our van fleet. And it seems like that's the process that we've been managing, and it's working well. Any questions? Okay, Article 9, facilities maintenance. We have several categories in facilities maintenance. You have operation of your buildings, care of the buildings, maintenance of the buildings, capital renewal and renovation, and architectural and engineering. Operation of your buildings is really taking care of your, I just want to get your utilities. So you're paying for your water, your sewer. We pay for our plowing from that portion. Care of the buildings are custodial crews who are taking care every day of those things. And then maintenance of the buildings are maintenance crews doing our grounds, making sure that our plumbing, our heating systems are being cared for. And then renewal and renovation, when we have projects that we put into our local side budget to take care of, we fund them there. And then architectural and engineering is looking ahead. What are we planning for? In the past, we've used that money, for instance, toward the development of our turf bidding process and making sure that we had a project manager. The money now is looking forward to two things: the Weatherby McGraw building project of the future, potentially, and also our electrical distribution system on the older side of the Hampden campus needs to be significantly overhauled. So we're making plans for that. We have had increase in fuel costs that we're projecting. Propane came online last year, and we are still paying for oil in a few of our buildings. We had increase in salaries to custodial maintenance. We've had custodial equipment and supplies that we've increased because we're making some transitions in how we're doing things. We're bringing things online in every building that are the same so that we're very consistent and we're cleaning with the same approaches and supplies. We've had a contracted service increase because a few of our contracts that we run, for instance, building and grounds, will have a slight increase. Our management system with Honeywell's having a slight increase. And then our multi-purpose turf field payment came online in this year's budget, along with our capital outlay and planning for the Weatherby McGraw.
Just as an aside, because we can't find the answer, does the school district pay a fee to the Hampden Water District for fire protection connections, to your knowledge?
I am not sure, so I will look into
Well,
that.
I mean, Hampden has a significant amount of money that goes for fire protection, the fire hydrants and that whole system, and we just didn't know how the school district ties into that.
We're paying a different entity for our fire protection evals and the monitoring for that, so I can get you
Well, I
that
guess
info.
we can talk about it later, but it's $500,000 is what Hampden's portion of that is.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk after and clarify what it is that
Yeah.
you're paying.
Okay.
Do you have anything that comes to your mind about that?
No, we're not paying anything on fire hydrants.
Nothing comes to my mind either, but we'll
We're
double
just
check
paying
it.
for fire protection services.
Well, that's what they call it, but essentially it's the fire hydrants, the infrastructure for the fire hydrants,
Yeah.
and all of that, and the maintenance of those kinds of things, and it's,
But we don't have the Hampden Water District as a vendor, I'm pretty sure. But we'll check on it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, it's just something that, down the road, it might be beneficial on how we
Absolutely.
deal with the water district, yeah.
Anything else? Okay, Article 10, debt service and other commitments. This is purely state-related debt service, and we have debt service principal for Hampden Academy, and then we have debt service flow-through for Frankfort Elementary School. The flow-through simply flows through us as an agency and is paid to Steersport?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
RSU 20.
RSU 20. We see a reduction around that just due to the pay down of the debt. And then Article 11, we come to a place where we have 0 because our school nutrition program is self-sustaining. I will say that in Article 9, we do support school nutrition service through services such as if an oven breaks and we need to have service on that. We do pay for some of those repairs out of Article 9 because it is part of your maintenance of your building. But we are looking right now at how they can continue to come online to support even more of those types of projects because it is performing in a very strong fashion. The remainder of the articles that we'll be voting on Thursday night are in relationship to assessments per town, making sure that the summary of the budget is clear to all, and then reviewing adult education expenditures along with capital reserve and our technology reserve. So what I'd like to do is move up to those articles so that we can talk about those and you can have clarity about those items. So let's look at Article 18. This corresponds with your slide number 34 in the packet that you received, if you want to also look at that. Our capital reserve account is presently at $611,326, and that includes what was dedicated to it for this school year. We have substantial roofing projects. Phase 1 of Wagner School alone is slated to be in excess of $235,000 for Phase 1. So we know that recommending an additional $275,000 this year puts us in a position for 3 things. It allows us to address the other projects that you can see are in that article, and there are several. It allows us to consider moving quite quickly with Phase 2 or 3 of the roofing project at Wagner in the future. And it allows us not to rely on whether we're able to apply and pull down the SRRF money instantaneously. We can still move on the projects and potentially still apply and have money to come. So I just want to make sure people are clear about the projects we have in Article 18. We are looking to expend up to $450,000 this year because the Wagner roof project alone, as I said, would be just about half of that number. Okay? And so we're looking at utility projects, including our electrical transformer and distribution services on the Hampden campus, potential generator installation, because we know that we will have payback in the end if we do so because of metering issues on whether it be in McGraw's campuses. We have the roofing replacement, Phase 1 of Wagner Middle School. We're going to be doing a small-time Weatherby portable roofing project in-house with our own crew. We're looking at ADA upgrades and renovation improvements at the central office. We have a situation at Central where we are not ADA compliant. We can bring somebody in down at the bottom entrance, but the doorway to get in, along with the way the configuration is, it's basically impossible. So we'll be looking at that. We have various flooring replacements at Smith School, Wagner School, Reedsbrook, and the gym floors being refinished at Wagner School this summer. We have safety and security projects, including door and lock replacements, window and skylight replacement renovations, and fencing projects here at Hampden Academy and Smith School. We've got Mason.
Hey, that came in $600,000 over the cost estimates. It's gonna get done, but yeah, it's,
It's tough.
and for future reference, and I'll work with you because I'm a trustee on the Environmental Trust Fund,
Okay.
but Roman numeral 7 might be eligible for environmental trust funds.
Okay.
I'll have to, I've only been on it for 2 months now, but just based on your description there, it
Great.
might be eligible for environmental trust funds. And so you and I can,
Excellent.
unfortunately, the next meeting's not till September, but,
Article,
We'll talk about that.
number 7, you said?
yeah, Roman numeral 7. I mean, that's consistent with the kind of things that have been funded before.
Yep.
Okay.
We just haven't seen anything come from the school district, so I would be kind of surprised if it wasn't eligible. It's just that nothing's come down the
Yep,
pipe.
okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And it does allow for reimbursement of eligible projects. So
Okay.
if you make the assumption that you have to do that work this summer, let's say, just for argument purposes, and it is an eligible project, then it is permitted to reimburse the completed project.
Excellent. So moved. Great. Thank you.
Will most of these projects go out to bid, or are you thinking some of these are going to be in-house?
We'll have a few that are in-house, but some of these projects can be broken up. Paving's a perfect example, where we have a bidding threshold in RSU 22 of 35,000 or greater. So there are some smaller paving projects, we can just make the contract if the contractor has time and get it done. So we'll look to do that where we can for efficiency's sake. Okay, Article 19, we'll move to this, is the transfer to an expenditure from the school athletic facility capital reserve. That's the reserve fund in which we dedicate 50% of our gate receipts every year so that we can fund towards replacement or improvement renovation of our athletic facilities. And I'd like to say now that the track and the tennis courts at HA have both been evaluated this year. And we're told that in 2 years, we'll need to have resurfacing of the tennis courts, and in 2 to 3 years, resurfacing of the track. And so we're not clear what exactly that will entail or what degree of financing through this reserve fund we'd need to be at. So we'll be making those plans going into next year. And then Article 20 is the introduction of the new Capital Reserve Fund for Technology. And you can read there, it's the $50,000 towards the software for accounting. We have been advised that calling it the Technology Capital Reserve Fund is the best way to go, because we don't know if we will end up needing some other technological support for software, and it also could encompass other things in the future. That's where we're going with that. So I think we've covered quite a bit, and we've been here quite a while. Happy to stop and answer any questions.
There is an error that I just heard about, and that was the voting places. And Frankfurt would be at the church, because the elementary school is now a assisted living center.
It's not right. Where does?
Right here, this sample.
Under the sample ballot.
Oh, thank you for showing us that,
Well,
because on the
it wasn't
front,
me.
it is the right place.
There you go.
Your information under.
That's right.
Good point.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
But I think that you wouldn't want anyone to go there and vote, and you do want those people to vote, so.
Yes, we do. Thank you. All right, well, thank you very much.
So Thursday, right here, 7 o'clock.
In the
District
gym.
budget, in the gym.
The motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Adjourn.